My son sent me a text at 7:08 in the morning, 2 days before our trip, telling me I wasn't welcome to stay in the house I had paid for. So I called the property manager that same afternoon and canceled the entire reservation. They flew into New Orleans on a Thursday, landed at Louis Armstrong Airport with matching luggage and 3 excited grandchildren, and pulled up to a locked door in the Garden District to find their keys didn't work. That was when my son called. I let it go to voicemail. Earl used to say New Orleans was the only city in America where the music found you before you even got off the plane. He said it smelled like memory, like pralines and rain and something underneath both, that you couldn't name but recognized anyway. He said it every single time we talked about going, which was often, because we never actually went. We kept putting it off. When the children were small, we said when they're older. When we finally had the money, we said when the timing is right. When the timing was right, something always shifted. A car that needed replacing, a roof that started leaking, a summer that got away from us without our permission. My husband died 3 years ago this past April. He was 67 years old, and one Tuesday morning he sat down in his recliner with his newspaper and a cup of decaf, and he didn't get back up. I was in the kitchen making toast. I heard nothing. I found him there, with the paper still folded in his lap, and for one long, strange second I thought he was sleeping. He looked so peaceful that I almost didn't want to disturb him. But I did, and he was gone. The months after that were a particular kind of quiet I don't have the right words for. The house was the same house, but it had a different sound to it. Every room just slightly emptier than before, even the ones I wasn't in. My son and his wife lived about 40 minutes away in Helotes, and they came by in the beginning. They brought food, sat with me, helped sort through paperwork. My grandchildren drew pictures and left them on the refrigerator. I thought for a little while that we would hold together. It was a full year before I noticed the drift. At first, it was small things. My daughter-in-law started hosting Thanksgiving at her mother's place in Houston. Not a problem, I told myself. It was farther for me to drive, but it was her family too. Then Christmas, then Easter. I was invited each time, but invited the way you invite a coworker to your birthday party, technically included, practically an afterthought. At Thanksgiving 2 years ago, she was taking photos of everyone in the living room. My son, his wife, their 3 kids, her parents, her sister. I was standing right there in the room, holding a dish towel I'd been using to dry my hands. She looked right through me the way people do when they've already decided who belongs in the frame. When I stepped closer to join the group, she said, sweetly, still holding up the phone, "Oh, I'm just doing one of the immediate family first." I stepped back. I dried my hands with the towel. I went to sit at the table and waited for dinner. My son didn't say a word about it, not then, not later, not ever. That winter, I started making a plan. It wasn't revenge, not yet. It wasn't even really about any of them. It was about my husband. I kept thinking about what he would have wanted. Not in a sentimental, vague way. I mean, I actually thought about it, practically. He would have wanted to see his grandchildren run on the riverbank. He would have wanted to sit in a courtyard somewhere in the French Quarter with a cold beer and hear a trumpet playing from around a corner. He would have wanted to eat beignets at Café du Monde early in the morning before the day got too hot and watch the pigeons scatter when the tourists came. He would have wanted to do all of that with the people he loved. I couldn't give him any of it anymore, but I could give it to the people he had loved. And maybe in that way, I could bring him along. I set up a dedicated savings account I called the Earl account. I put in $200 the day I opened it, and then I added to it every month. Sometimes more when I had it, sometimes less. I still worked part-time, consulting at a pediatric clinic on the east side of San Antonio 3 days a week. Every shift I picked up, half of what I made, went straight into that account. I stopped getting my hair done at the salon and started doing it at home. I canceled my streaming services and went back to library books. I told myself it was worth it. By the end of 2 years, I had $16,200. I called a property management company in New Orleans and found a house in the Garden District. 6-bedroom Victorian with a wraparound porch, ceiling fans in every room, and a kitchen big enough to hold all of us. The kind of house my husband would have stood in front of and said, "Now that's a house." I paid the security deposit under my own name. I booked a dinner cruise on the Mississippi for the second night, a Creole cooking class at a spot near the warehouse district for the grandchildren, and a guided cemetery tour. Because my husband had always been fascinated by New Orleans cemeteries, said they were more honest about death than any place he'd ever been. I ordered custom family shirts, navy blue with white letters, in his memory, New Orleans 2026, with a small trumpet underneath. I had each one monogrammed. I wrapped them in tissue paper. I labeled every single one by hand. My son came for dinner in February, 2 months before the trip. Just him. I made his favorite, smothered chicken, rice, green beans from the garden. I showed him the full itinerary at the kitchen table. He looked genuinely moved. He hugged me when he left and said, "Mom, this is incredible. Dad would have loved every bit of this." I thought we were okay. I thought everything, the Thanksgivings, the photographs, the slow erasure, was something we were quietly moving past. I was wrong. The text came on a Tuesday morning at 7:08. I was pouring my first cup of coffee, watching the mockingbird in the pecan tree out back. "Mom, Shayla's parents ended up being able to make it after all, flying in from Atlanta. We want the trip to be just our unit and her family. It'll be a lot of people in the house, and we think it'll flow better if it's just us. You can come join us for dinner on Sunday, the last night. Hope you understand. Love you." I read it 3 times. I set the phone face down on the counter. I stood at the window for a long time. The mockingbird was working on something in the branches, busy with his morning, unbothered. I watched him until the coffee in my mug went cold. Then I picked up the phone and opened the lease agreement I'd saved in my email. Leaseholder, my name. The property management company had my credit card, my phone number, my signature on 3 separate documents. I was the only person in the world who could modify or cancel that reservation. I read through it twice, slowly, the way you read something when you want to be absolutely certain you're understanding it correctly. I was certain. That afternoon, my daughter-in-law called. Her voice was bright and cheerful in the way it got when she was managing something. "Just checking in," she said, "making sure everything is confirmed on your end for the booking." I said, "I believe so. Is there anything you need for the trip? I could pack some snacks for the little one. He gets carsick on long rides." A small pause. "Oh, no, we've got all of that handled. You really don't need to worry about anything. Honestly, you should just rest. Relax at home. You've been working so hard. This trip would probably just be exhausting for you anyway." She said it so kindly, like she was doing me a favor. Of course, I said. You all enjoy. After I hung up, I didn't move for a while. I looked at the stack of tissue-wrapped shirts on the dining room table, each one with its hand-lettered label. I found the one with her name on it, set it aside, then her mother's, her father's, her sister's. Then I went to my desk and opened my email. There was a guest roster my son had submitted to the property company. I counted the names. 9 people. Mine was not among them. I found the property management company's customer service number and dialed it. Good afternoon. This is the account holder for reservation. I read off the confirmation number. I need to cancel the reservation in full. The woman on the phone was professional and kind. She walked me through the process. Because I was calling more than 48 hours before check-in, I was entitled to a full refund of the deposit, minus a small processing fee. I said that was fine. She confirmed my identity. I confirmed. She said the reservation would be closed within the hour. Is there anything else I can help you with? She asked. The dinner cruise on the 14th, I said. Booked under the same account. Would you like to cancel that as well? Please. I canceled the cooking class next. Then the cemetery tour. All of it had been booked through my email, on my credit card, under my name, every single thing. When I was done, I closed the laptop. I gave them one last chance. Not because I was soft, but because I needed to be certain. I texted my son, simple and calm. Let me know if the grandkids need anything packed. Also have some motion sickness patches for the little one if you'd like them. I watched the screen. 2 gray check marks turned blue. He had read it. I waited 22 minutes. Nothing, not a single word. No thank you. No, we're fine. Not even a thumbs up. Just the blue checks and the silence behind them. I set the phone on the table, and I thought about what my husband used to say when he was working through something hard. He'd stand at the ironing board in the kitchen at 6 in the morning. Even on days off, he ironed his own shirts, said it helped him think. And he'd hum to himself, and by the time I came down for coffee, he'd have figured out whatever was bothering him. I used to tease him about it. He'd just smile and say some problems need a warm iron and a little quiet. I had been patient. I had been warm. I had been quiet for a very long time. I went to call my friend Shirley. Shirley and I had worked together for 19 years in the surgical recovery unit at the hospital downtown. She was there the night I worked a double and came home to find my husband had made dinner and left it warming on the stove, with a note that said, "Proud of you." She was there when I got the call that he was gone. She showed up at my door with a casserole and a bottle of Woodford Reserve and sat with me until almost midnight because, she said, she just didn't feel right leaving me alone. When I told her what had happened, all of it, the text, the phone call, the guest list, the canceled reservation, she was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then she said, "Say less, I'm in." I called Joyce next, then Maxine, then 2 more women from the unit, Louise and Dolores, women who had held patients' hands in the dark, eaten cold cafeteria food at 3 in the morning, cried in the parking garage after the hard shifts, and then gone back inside and done it all over again. Women who had given everything they had for decades and received very little back. Not one of them had ever been to New Orleans. I rebooked. Not the Garden District Victorian. That felt like the wrong chapter now. I found a 4-bedroom shotgun house in the Marigny neighborhood, 3 blocks from Frenchman Street, where my husband had always said the real music lived, smaller, more intimate. A courtyard in the back with string lights strung between the banana trees. The night we arrived, I placed his photo on the mantel in the front room. The one from our 35th anniversary, him laughing with his head thrown back, the sound of it almost visible on his face. Nobody asked me to move it. They called while our plane was somewhere over the Gulf of Mexico. I know this because when we landed and my phone reconnected, I had 11 missed calls. 9 from my son, 2 from my daughter-in-law, plus a voicemail and 4 texts. I put the phone in my carry-on and helped Shirley get her bag from the overhead bin, and we walked out into the New Orleans afternoon. The air hit us like something alive, warm and dense and layered with something I couldn't name exactly, but recognized immediately. He had been right. The city found you before you even looked for it. Dolores claimed the back bedroom with the courtyard window. Louise found the record player in the corner of the sitting room and announced that wherever there was a record player, she was home. Shirley said she was making red beans and rice the first night, whether any of us asked her to or not. I set the photo on the mantel and stepped back. He was laughing in the picture, really laughing, head tilted, eyes crinkled, nearly shut, caught fully off guard by something joyful. I had taken it at a backyard barbecue on a Sunday afternoon, 10 years before he died. I put my hand on the frame. I said quietly, "We made it, baby." My son reached me on the second evening. I almost didn't answer. I was sitting on the front steps with a glass of sweet tea, listening to a trombone from somewhere down the block when the phone buzzed. I looked at his name. I sat with it for a moment. I answered. He was in a hotel lobby. I could hear it in the background. Hard floors, distant television, the hollow echo of a large interior space. His voice was tight in the way it gets when he's trying to hold several things together at once. "Mom," he exhaled. The property company said the reservation was canceled by the account holder. The cruise, the cooking class, everything's gone. We've got 9 people in a Hampton Inn and the kids are exhausted. I need to understand what happened. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "There was no mistake, Jerome. I canceled the reservation." Silence. "Mom, you told me I could come for dinner on the last night," I said. "Sunday at 7. That offer still stands. I'll see you then." I hung up. I sat back on the steps and listened to the trombone. The dinner cruise was the second night. The Mississippi in the evening is something you cannot entirely prepare yourself for. The width of it, the darkness of it, the way the city lights reflect off the surface in long, unsteady lines. We stood at the railing as the boat pulled away from the dock, all 6 of us. And the band played something I didn't know the name of, but my husband would have recognized immediately. He had that kind of memory for music. Maxine put her arm around my shoulder. She said, "Tell me something about him that you haven't told anyone in a while." I thought about it. "He ironed his own shirts," I said, "even on days off. Said it helped him think. He'd stand in the kitchen at 6 in the morning with the iron going, humming to himself, and by the time I came down for coffee he'd have figured out whatever was bothering him." She nodded slowly. A man who knew how to take care of himself. Not many of them learn that. "No," I said, "not many do." We stood at the railing while the city slid past on both banks, lit up and warm and full of itself, the way New Orleans always is, like it doesn't need your approval and never did. The band shifted into something slower, Dolores took Joyce's hand and swayed. Louise had found herself something from the bar and was telling Shirley a story that was making Shirley laugh in that silent, whole-body way. She laughed when something truly got her. I took a photograph of all of them, just to have it. The email from my son arrived 4 days after we got home. I was half unpacked, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of peppermint tea, when the notification came through. The subject line said, "Wanted to reach out." Mom, I know things went wrong on the trip, and I know a lot of that falls on me. Shayla and I should have handled it differently. The way we communicated wasn't fair to you, and I understand if you're hurt. I want to be honest with you. The hotel ended up being expensive, and with rebooking fees and the activities falling through, we're in a tight spot right now. I know this is a lot to ask, but if any part of the deposits came back to you as refunds, would you consider helping us cover some of what we had to spend? Even a partial amount would make a real difference. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I didn't know who else to ask. Love, Jerome. I read it once, then again. I made note of the architecture of it. The apology in the first paragraph. The pivot into the money ask in the second. The two things sitting side by side as though they were the same, as though he expected me not to notice the seam between them. I thought about the Earl account. 2 years of double shifts and cancelled subscriptions and home haircuts. The refund notifications that had come back to me one by one after I made those phone calls, small and quiet, like interest finally paid on a very old loan. I thought about Shirley standing at the record player the first night in the Marigny, lifting the needle carefully, saying, "Now, let's see what we've got here." I thought about Dolores at the railing of the cruise boat, tears on her face she didn't bother to wipe, saying when I asked if she was all right, "I'm better than okay." I haven't felt this scene in years. I thought about the photograph I'd taken of all 5 of them on the back steps of the shotgun house on our last morning. Café au lait in hand, still in their pajamas, none of them trying to look like anything other than exactly what they were. I closed the email. I did not reply. Not because I was bitter. I had thought I might be, but I wasn't. Bitterness takes root when you keep hoping for something from someone who has already shown you what they have to give. I was done hoping for that particular thing, and without the hoping, there was nothing left for bitterness to feed on. What I felt instead was something unclenched, something I hadn't felt in a long time, like a fist held closed for years that had slowly, finally opened. I got up and went to the window. The mockingbird was back in the pecan tree, working through his morning song, starting a phrase, pausing, changing it slightly, starting again. My husband used to say that mockingbirds never repeat themselves exactly, that every time you think you've heard something before, they've already changed it, just enough that it's something new. That the whole point of them was the variation. I watched him for a while. Then I went to make a fresh pot of coffee, and I let the house be quiet around me, and I let myself be exactly where I was. Not a footnote, not a fund, not a name missing from a guest list. Just a woman who had loved well, spent wisely, and finally, after far too long, chosen herself. That was enough. That had always been enough. It just took me until now to believe it.